Hi everyone, I'm just going to give a couple of extra minutes for people to join us that haven't joined already, and then we'll get started. Is anyone okay to just let me know if everyone can see the slides okay and everyone can hear okay? Okay, I think we're good to go. So good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Scottish Contaminated Land Forum Conference 2021. This is our 11th annual conference. It's the first one of which that we're holding online. Please bear with us. We are all volunteers doing this, and hopefully we will, with the technology will work and everybody can get on okay, but yeah, just bear with us. The title of the conference is Brownfields Remediation and Reuse in the Circular Economy. The title this year was inspired by the upcoming COP26 conference that's due to be held in Glasgow in the next few weeks. In some ways, we're sad not to be at our usual home and seeing you all in person at Strathclyde University. But in some ways, doing the conference online this year has opened up our doors to presenters and attendees, for which getting to Glasgow and a normal conference format would be a bit of a problem. So in a lot of ways, we're viewing this as a positive, and welcome to all the people that are able to join us because they don't have to get themselves to Glasgow. So in that vein, it's probably quite a good time, and we're going to run some polls throughout the conference. So Tom, if you're able to run poll 1, and if everyone who's attending could possibly respond to the poll, we'd love to know where everyone is actually joining us from today. So the format of the conference this year is 2 afternoon sessions, the first one of which is this afternoon and the second is tomorrow afternoon. Each afternoon session is split into 2 sub-sessions. They each have their overall theme, which is related to the conference title. Your link that you've got to join the conference does give you access to both afternoon sessions, so we really hope to see you all again tomorrow for the other sessions. So session 1 today is Net Zero Transition and Opportunities for Land Use. Session 2 is Nature-Based Remediation Solutions, and then tomorrow we have session 3, Innovative Low Carbon Sustainable Remediation Approaches, and session 4, Land Contamination Risk Assessment and Sustainability. There is a conference programme which you would have been able to download from our website before today, but it can also be downloaded today using the handout links within your webinar features. So the programme has got details of all our presenters, their abstracts, bios, information on our conference supporters, and so it's a worthwhile document to just get just now from the handout section so that you can follow along with it. Some housekeeping issues for the conference in general. We keep everyone muted and with camera off just to ensure that there's no interruptions to our speakers. If you have a question for one of our speakers, and we really hope that you do, please can you use the questions box within your webinar function. Yeah, Tom, if you want to share the poll 1 result now, that'd be great. So yeah, going back to the questions, if you have a question, please can you use the questions box. If you put down who your question's to and what your question is, we have several organisers behind the scenes who will manage the questions box. They'll direct your question to me at the relevant point, and we can ask it of the relevant person at the time. Similarly, if you're having any issues at all at any point today, if you just pop it into the questions box, again, we've got behind the scenes people who will pick up your question, you know, like if you can't hear us or something like that, and we'll try and troubleshoot that for you. If for any reason your internet drops out or you lose your connection entirely and you get sort of bumped out, you should be able to rejoin using the same link as you joined with initially. And if you're having any problems regards that, if you use the sclfweb@gmail.com email address, we're monitoring that as well. And again, there's people there that can help you if you're having any problems. So ordinarily the Q&A sessions will be at the end for all of our presenters. The exception is for session 1 today because Martin can't stay with us until the end of the session. So we're going to do a short Q&A just for Martin immediately after his presentation. So please, if you could submit any questions for Martin during his presentation, and then we'll ask his questions at the end to let him get away, and then we'll do the other 2 presenters at the end of the session. Speakers, in terms of managing your time, we do need to try and keep to time today. So what I'm proposing to do is I will turn off my webcam and mute myself while your presentation is running. But I will remain muted and turn my webcam back on when you have 2 minutes to go. So when you see my face pop up on the screen, that is your 2-minute warning for your time. These are our sponsors for today's session. We have Juta, Earthsoft, ERS, Ramble, I2 Analytical and VHE. You'll find details of all our sponsors, including their website details, in the conference programme, and we'll be running some videos prepared by our sponsors between sessions. We're really grateful for their support of the conference, which has allowed us to purchase the webinar platform that we're running today's conference from, and it's also allowed us to keep the ticket price for people to a very reasonable £30, and also to offer free tickets to students and people like that. So we really do appreciate the conference supporters, and it would be great if people who are attending the conference could take the time to just go and have a visit of our supporters from today. So if it's okay with Tom, I think if we run poll 2 just now, what best describes your current role? We'd be interested just to see who we've got with us throughout the industry today. So we'll just run that second poll just now. Okay, so moving on to session 1, net zero transition and opportunities for land use. As I mentioned earlier, COP26 is scheduled to be held in Glasgow later this year in just a few weeks' time. It's the UN Climate Change Conference, which is bringing countries together to push commitments with respect to cutting global carbon emissions and achieving climate change goals. At COP21, the Paris Agreement brought together for the first time nearly all countries of the world into an agreement to work together to set targets for global carbon emissions reduction which they were aiming to bring global warming below 2 degrees increase from pre-industrial levels, and with the aim of achieving 1.5 degrees. However, the commitments in terms of the actual commitments made in Paris by countries, what they were going to do to cut carbon emissions, won't go far enough to achieve the goal of 1.5 degrees. I think the general consensus is that the agreement we've got in place just now would equate to around a 3-degree warming compared to pre-industrial levels. So essentially, a lot more has got to be done to ensure that their relatively ambitious targets are met, and that perhaps COP26 in Glasgow represents an opportunity to move towards this. A commitment to move globally to a low carbon future and working to achieve net zero, with net zero obviously being a situation where we have a balance between carbon entering the atmosphere and the carbon removed from it. I think it's a general consensus that in order to achieve this, carbon emissions must be cut. And achieving net zero within the UK has been written into UK law that they want to achieve this by 2050. We're already at 2021, so I'm guessing time is of the essence with respect to that. So in terms of why we need to change, well, at 2 degrees warming, it's forecast that there would be widespread effects on both people and nature. For example, a third of the world's population would be exposed to severe heat. All warm water coral reefs would be destroyed. And it's estimated that all Arctic sea ice would melt entirely during at least one summer per decade. Even at 1.5 degrees, which is their target, the effects would still be serious but less severe. So there would be lower risks of ongoing food and water shortages and fewer species at risk of extinction. In terms of just now as a time for change, a lot of people feel it's the perfect time to move forward with these changes. The global COVID-19 pandemic has left world economies needing to rebuild, and there's a strong feeling among many to rebuild better and stronger and to promote the so-called green recovery. And the timing of COP26 could represent the perfect forum for more significant commitments to change to be made. There is obviously a consensus that the climate change goals that have been set are quite ambitious, and they will require contributions from every single sector. So this is where we are coming from today at the conference. So session 1 today is entitled the Net Zero Transition and Opportunities for Land Use. We have 3 speakers in this first session. Martin Valenti, who's the Director for Net Zero at the South of Scotland Enterprise, Shaswati Chowdhury, a doctoral student at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden, and Jim Philp, who's a policy analyst at the OECD in Paris. So I think if we move on to Martin's presentation, I will stop sharing my screen. There we go. So Martin leads the South of Scotland Enterprise efforts to transition to a net zero economy. He's an award-winning sustainability practitioner and for over 30 years has worked in a variety of senior management roles, which includes 17 years with SEPA and a secondment with Scottish Enterprise as the head of climate enterprise and the strategic lead for COP26. He shaped and delivered inclusive growth initiatives and directed major high-profile collaborative projects for the Scottish Government on climate change and sustainability. And in 2018, he created the Vacant and Derelict Land Task Force, and we are delighted that he is joining us today. So I will pass over to Martin now.
Thanks, Steve. Just checking that my camera and my sound is good. Can I get a thumbs up? We all good to go?
Yes.
It's funny, all the technology these days, because there's so many different platforms, and when you use one platform, the other one steals your camera and your microphone, so you've got to sometimes look hard to find it. First thing I would say is thanks to you, Eve, and to Alison and to the Scottish Contaminated Land Forum for the invitation, because I'm someone that get asked to present a lot. I still haven't quite figured that out why, but I think I'm getting to know why. It's because I don't do presentations. I haven't got fancy slides showing lots of great data and stats. I'd love to be able to do that, but it's not in my skill base. I don't give presentations, I give propositions. So I'm here to propose something to you and to your group and your cohort and your reach, is that the way we've been dealing with climate change and the environment, and this is going to split the room, has been wrong for quite a long time. We've been viewing the environment as a compliance issue. The environment has been, you don't have to look on job websites to see environment or compliance people or sustainability predominantly sit in compliance functions within agencies, especially in the private sector. And you've got to ask yourself, are we saying that the best we can do is manage the problem, or are we actually keen to motivate ourselves and try and solve some of them? And if you're looking at solutions for solving problems, that tends to be business development and entrepreneurial enterprising teams. So maybe there's something about our generic approach hasn't been what it should be, which is why for the last 50 years, 50, we've been managing the environment. And with all of the great stuff we've done, with all of the great agencies and the brilliant academia and the brilliant reach of SCLF and everything we've done, you know, if you get to flip to the end of that book, is we're in a climate emergency. So something's not worked. So there's something wrong with their generic overall approach. And I think, and this is my view, not that of my agency or anyone else for that matter, he gets the caveat in, is that our mindset is wrong about these problems. Our mindset is that, and I've worked in the public, private, and the third sector, and every sector or every agency or every part of government or everywhere I've worked, the people in that area think someone else is to blame for climate change. So you're constantly looking to see who to blame for climate change, and that's manifested spectacularly so at the moment with Greta Thunberg and young people. What you've got there is a bunch of angry people saying, what were you guys thinking? How have you not managed to solve these problems? Why have you fallen asleep at the wheel? Our house is on fire. Now, as admirable it is to point to the problems and raise awareness, well done. But we now need to put the fire out. This is the problem we face, that we only have a very short period of time, depending on which books you read or which ideologies you subscribe to. I tend to look at the IPCC's report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they kind of speak from, you know, the variety of most of the scientists in the world, and they say the next 7 or 8 years is critical. If we do not shift the dial on climate change, it's game over. And you couldn't get a more stark reality than that. And there's a great manifestation of that. If somebody can Google it, maybe stick the slides on, Alison or someone, is the Ed Hawkins stripes. He was a member of the IPCC, and he uses, instead of a 10,000 word document, he uses these stripes showing the global temperature increase from 1850 to 2020, and it's stark. On one end of the column, you see this huge green, and then it's bright red and crimson red, and that's getting worse. So there's a challenge that we all have, and the challenge is, how do we take the climate emergency and make it a climate opportunity? That's really important. So that, to do that, requires a systematic change in our mindset. The mindset that, and here's what I'm hoping for, you're not looking over your shoulder to find who to blame. You're not looking behind you to see who's coming up after you to solve the problem. You can't kick this issue down the line for someone else, or you can't wait to 2045 or 2049 in the UK case to wait till somebody press the button and it all fixes. This is harsh, it's grim, it's real, but we do have time. This is why I get quite excited. So the first parts of my propositions are, we're in a bad place, we've got major challenges. If everyone in the world lived like we like living in Scotland, we'd need 3 planets. The last time I checked, it was 1. So you've got a massive oversupply or over demand on supply. And what happens is you've got an ecological debt, and Mother Nature demands action from that debt. So what happens is you get these increase in temperatures, the forest fires. We've had fires in the flow territory here in Scotland. You've never thought that. The flooding and all of these things. And again, they're all related in one way to land, which we'll come back to because of today's expertise on the call. So in 54 days, the world will convene in Glasgow. It's terrifying to even think that. I mean, when I was at Strathclyde University, we used to write and write essays about COP26, and we'd never ever thought in our wildest dreams it would be here, but it is. It's in that dear green place. So what will the world see when they arrive? 54 days time. Will they see a nation on its knees, crumbling under Climageddon, crumbling under the challenge and the complexity and the ambiguity of climate change? Will they see a nation fighting with each other, going, well, you're to blame for climate change. I want to see change, but I don't actually want to change, but I want you to change. And I don't want to see these sort of businesses anymore. I want to see these sort of businesses. Do they see that? And if they do, we're finished. It's game over. It literally is that serious. Or, and here's my proposition, a call to action. Do they see a nation on its toes with ideas, with solutions, with innovation, with collaboration? So more combat, less combat, apologies, more collaboration. That is essential that we have that. So who do you collaborate with to solve the problem? That's a question you should be thinking about yourself. Or do you meet, and this is a loaded question, do you meet in forums like this and talk about how tough it is out there and how challenging climate change is? And if only other sectors would do stuff, you guys would be able to do more. So that's the thought to think about. Or do you think, right, we're going to have to reach out with our peer group. We're going to have to reach into the deepest, darkest recesses across Scotland and globally to collaborate in a way we've never done before. Because this is our time. This is the time for expertise of your nature to get involved in being problem solvers rather than problem listers. I'm not suggesting you're problem listers, but there's a lot of people who spend a lot of their time saying, if only this sector could do that, and if only governments would be bolder, and if only businesses would be doing more, and somebody needs to do something about climate change. Well, we need to do something about climate change. You need to do something about climate change, and we need to try and be collaborative and less combative. We need to be thinking of the climate opportunity, not the climate problem. We need to think about who we need to work with to try and build this momentum, this kind of drumbeat of hope over fear, because hope mobilizes people, fear paralyzes people. And you just need to Google and the word climate change, and the 90% of the stories we've got will be doom and gloom, some stranded panda on the North Pole somewhere, or some horrible forest fire. And these are real, but they're not the only reality. If you go onto LinkedIn, for example, and Google climate change, you'll see 1,000 different businesses offering solutions. You'll see lots of different financiers and investors offering financial models and mechanisms to get involved in. So I don't know about you, but I'm not going to waste any more of my time because I'm getting on in the room of people who are going, yeah, it's really, really tough and it's challenging. I want to work in that room over there where people are going, let's get this done. Let's get on with it. Let's roll our sleeves up. Let's be collaborative. Let's be fearless. And by the way, that fearless attitude needs to be coupled with humility. So the humility is, we don't have all the answers, but we're going to be relentless until we get them. So there's something about an endeavour. So I'm asking you my propositions that I kind of hope someone's making lists of them. Collaboration, not combat. Opportunity, not problem. Solving problems, not listing them. And the one I would say is that climate change is often sold to us as this cliff edge. Well, who jumps off cliff edges? So let's not talk about that. Let's speak about mountains. There's another way to view it. Mountains are equally dangerous and equally perilous, but we like climbing mountains. There's an endeavour you get with your colleagues and your compatriots, and you've got base camp one, and you can find Sherpas. And actually, the higher the mountain, the more excited you get, and the more accomplished you feel, and the more bold and creative you become. Can you see what I'm getting at here? Is that we need to shift every single thing that we've been doing for the last 50 years about climate change is someone else's problem. It's too complex, it's too big, it's overwhelming. I'm paralysed by the enormity of it too. Do you know what? We need to do something. We need to act now. We need to act together. We need to be bold. We need to be fearless. We need to be courageous and humble all the way along that line. So, take you back to what I said 10 minutes ago. What did the world see when they arrive in Glasgow? They see a nation on its toes. They see Scotland as the Scotland that we all dream it should be and hope it would be, and determined that it will be, which is giving pain back what we gave the world. We gave the world a couple of industrial revolutions, whether they wanted that or not, and it did have some good and great stuff, but it also has some recalcitrant challenges, which a lot of your expertise is now cleaning up the mess of. We also gave the world a slightly wonky economic system, which has not been great for everyone. I'm not denying it's been good because we've had the Enlightenment, we've had a fantastic education system, we've got great healthcare, but we know how much we rely on healthcare these days. And we also have some beautiful nature where we can go and unwind and feel good about ourselves. But nature's under serious pressure as well. So when you think about the definition of net zero, and you can Google lots of definitions, I like to use the term net zero as an ability to tackle the climate and the nature crisis in the winter. For example, cutting emissions absolutely has to happen, and there's a trajectory for that, and there's technical solutions coming along the line This is going to make that happen, as it has done for the last 30 years. Is it fast enough? No. Could it be faster? Absolutely. But what do we do in the meantime? Well, we're waiting on hydrogen planes becoming, mainstream hydrogen shipping and so on and so on. What do we do? Do we do nothing? Well, of course you don't. You think about, well, how can we sequester and manage our nature so that it becomes a net absorber of climate? So that's the whole term, net zero. So we can tackle some of these challenges, these technical challenges, which are still in transit, by investing in nature and peatlands. I mean, there's 600,000 hectares of peatlands in Scotland. It is golden. It is literally gold for the future peatlands, and is it all? And we know what we know about peatland being a great absorber of carbon, and it holds and stores carbon for thousands of years. So knowing that, you think we'd be able to protect it all. Well, guess what? We haven't. So there's 600,000 hectares of peatland. Quite a lot of it is degraded, and degraded peatland leads to emissions. So there's a problem there, and the public push before you all go, well, of course, governments, back to that point I mentioned earlier about combat, well, governments should spend more money. Well, they can't, because the public push can't do everything. Scotland's got quite a small public push by the time we've got all of our income revenue and our tax revenue, and we've got education and schools and all of the lovely things we like. But peatlands need investment. So what is the work of the Scottish Contaminated Land Forum? How do you articulate an opportunity? See what I did there? How do you articulate an opportunity about net zero that puts Scotland at a unique position, a unique selling point? We have natural capital in abundance. I'm looking at it. You probably walked through it today. It's the thing you relied on during COVID when your heart was aching to get outside, is just going and being with nature. Natural capital is spectacularly important for us. It defines who we are and the sort of lives we live, but we don't protect it to the degree we should. So let's think about, how do we use your expertise and articulate natural capital so that it becomes nature-based solutions? And how do we deploy those nature-based solutions at speed, with scale and ambition? For some of these sectors have got the hard-to-reach emissions where the technological solutions don't yet exist. So there's net zero for you. Two opportunities in the one. So there's something really, really important too about this trajectory for transitioning to net zero. We can't just do it for the sake of it. We have to do a just transition. You'll hear that term mentioned a lot. And people will say, so what is a just transition? I'll give you a definition of an unjust transition. Is what we did to the coal sector back in the 70s, 80s. We said, we don't like you, you can leave. And they did. But the consequence of that, we still feel today. You still got social, economic, environmental decline. You just need to drive around a former coal mining village. I grew up in one. And you'll see the degradation in the social, economic costs for that unjust transition. So what we're saying here is that, and it's a unique narrative for Scotland, which is really great, and you should get all over this if I were you, is that how do you transition sectors who have still got a way to go for cutting their emissions, oil and gas, landfilling, mining, so on and so forth, right? All of the kind of stuff you guys know much more about than me. How do you articulate a different approach? How do you say to these sectors, we need you to be here in the future, but not the way you are. We need you to transition. And by the way, rather than that combative, down with that sort of thing placard, you need to change. Why don't we offer solutions? Why don't we use our technological understanding and our agency, if you know what I mean by that, use our agency to articulate a whole new narrative for how to deal with land, how to deal with organisations who have got challenges still, rather than let's just castigate them into some burning pit. Because I can guarantee if we listened to just Greta Thunberg, for example, you would kill our economy stone dead. You would cause major grief and major harm to certain parts of the economy. I'm not an economist, but I do follow people like Mark Carney, Mariana Mazzucato. These people are economists, and they speak about a just transition. And brilliantly, for you all and for me, and for those people who I see from the rest of the UK and the world, welcome, by the way, is that Scotland's leading the world on the just transition. So we had the world's first just transition commission who reported, I think maybe 3 or 4 months ago. You can Google it, read the reports. But one of the key themes of the 4 was land. So there's just something in there. There's a whole new space for contaminated land or land specialist or land regeneration specialist, there's a whole new narrative as yet not fully understood that needs to be understood in, did I say 54 days? Yeah, so 54 days. And once you've got this new narrative, this fellowship of the willing, you all, what's your collective impact at COP26? Which meetings and events do you need to be at so that the world can go, this sounds like an opportunistic narrative where investors will come and follow, and it's just a start fact, and I'm not just always on about the money, but the Committee on Climate Change said Scotland can be the world's first net zero economy. I'm just going to let that rest in your head for a minute. That is sensational, okay? And Scotland cut its emissions and grew its economy faster than any country in the G20. There's another stat for you probably never heard because it's quite glib to sound optimistic when the world is so grim at the moment. You've got Brexit, you've got COVID, and all of a sudden there's net zero and then just transition. It is no surprise businesses and communities feel overwhelmed and on their knees and just kind of cliff edge. But this is exactly the time, and it was part of Eve's slides, and it said this is the right time. This is not just the right time, it is the only time we'll ever get to do this. So we need to not anymore go back to the old ways of working, which I remind you has led us to a climate emergency. So that's a really important point. No matter how good we think we were doing and how bold we think we were being and how courageous, it isn't enough. So whenever you think you're being really, really bold, double it. So that's my guide for today. Somebody can maybe tweet that one. The other point I would say is that these events are happening. You've got the US coming over, you've got Joe Biden, John Kerry. So think about that for an opportunity. If the US are coming here, massive land areas, you need to demonstrate a net zero narrative on land that they can then take back that becomes a playbook for the US. Trump hasn't gone away. He's just sitting waiting for COP to fail. This is what he's doing. And then he's going to come out and go, well, I told you a lot, that environment was a waste of time. Just don't bother about it. Let's just go on and do more shale and coal and all the other unusual stuff. So what Joe Biden, what the US needs, what the world needs from Scotland is that how do we articulate shifting our lens from problem to opportunity, one, shifting our economy from the wealth of nations to the well-being of nations, two, that's a really good thing. And how do we hit the jackpot with their geography? Because we hit it twice with their geology, with oil and coal and gas. So how do we shift that now to wind, wave, tidal, solar, geothermal? And if we do think that that's the opportunity, and it is, what's your role? What's SCLF's role in bringing that all together? So I've got 2 minutes left, and it's difficult to try and bring to you how excited I am about COP, because you, me, all of us will never get a chance like this again in our lives. People in universities and colleges of the future will be reading about COP26 in Glasgow. Where will you feature in that journal? Will you be the organisation or the group that sat back going, somebody needs to do something about climate change? Or were you the organisation and group and the cohort that took action, that thought bigger, that acted faster, that was more impactful, that was more collaborative, that was bringing solutions? So I think that's a kind of a challenge stroke call to action, Eve. I think for you, for the Scottish Contaminated Land Forum, you've been about for a long time, as have I. But it's always that thing in my head is that we now need to think differently. Change is coming, the disruption is coming our way. We either become part of the disruption in a disciplined way, or we run the risk of being disrupted. So I'll stop at that just to make sure that I'm on time. I'm actually able to stay and listen to the rest of the talks, because I cancelled all my other stuff because this is just too exciting and too enjoyable. And I'm always happy to help Alison, who's someone who I've known and admired for a very, very long time. In fact, when I was setting up that Vacant Derelict Land Task Force, Alison will bear me out here. She was the first person I called. I said, because we need you and your group of people with the expertise you've got to come and get involved in it. So I'll stop at that to make sure I'm on time. Eve, thank you very much for listening to me.
No, thanks, Martin. Thank you very much for keeping to time and for your presentation. I actually really enjoyed moving away from the traditional format of having slides and just listening to you talk. It was really good. Thank you very much. And yeah, are you okay to stay till the end and we can do Q&A at the end, or yeah, is that okay?
So I'll put my camera off now and my mic and just sit and listen and wait to come back on whenever it suits you.
Perfect, and we'll come back to you at the end. Brilliant,
Right.
thank you for that, Martin.
Bye now.
Really appreciate it. Okay, so our next presenter today is Shaz Chowdhury, who is a doctoral student at Chalmers University of Technology in Sweden. So Shaz works mainly within the project entitled Opportunities for Preparing Urban Contaminated Land for Bio-Based Production within the Department of Architecture and Civil Engineering. The research project is transdisciplinary, and the aim is to investigate the possibilities and preconditions for preparing urban brownfields for temporary and long-term urban green spaces. Really happy to have you with us today, Chaz. So I will pass over to you for your presentation.
So everybody can see my screen now? Yeah. So hello, I'm Shaswati Chowdhury. You can call me Shaz or just, yeah. I am graduated as an architect from Bangladesh. Then I kind of diverted my interest to sustainability issues and causes. And currently I'm doing my PhD in architecture and civil engineering in Sweden, and my university, Chalmers University of Technology. So my presentation title here is Bio-Based Circular Economy and Brownfields, Concepts and Overlaps. So first concept we have at our hand is bio-based circular economy. So before we go to circular economy, we need to understand what our current economy is, what we are calling the linear economy. Here we have a limited amount of resources, which is our world, and we take a lot of it and we waste a lot of it to make something. And to make process, we again waste a lot. And then we finally create something useful. Again, we are as wasteful as we are. And then our process ends with, again, wasting. We dispose our useful objects. So yeah, this is the linear economy, which is a chain of wastage. So this is difficult to sustain. And of course, the first reason would be the population growth. And it is not something that is recent or new development for us. We knew it from a very long ago. This 1972 report to the Club of Rome, the limits to growth, kind of started this discussion that our population growth is unsustainable. And then, of course, finite resources. As our world is not getting any larger, we are not getting another planet. And again, this discussion that we have limited resources in different sectors, it kind of came into forefront when the concept of planetary boundaries came forward in early 2000. And then, of course, the climate change. There were lots of researchers and lots of industries as well knew about the changing climate situation, but it wasn't came into popular discussion up until the interdisciplinary panelist IPCC report on the global warming. This is the old report where the limit was 1.5, then there was it went up to 2.5. Yes, I think they are now currently staying at 2.5 degrees Celsius. So yeah, we knew that there were different issues in sustaining our current linear economy, and what could be the alternative concept. One of these alternative concepts is circular economy. Here we have the resource development, the resource make processes. It kind of takes place in a loop, and we have the same 5 options, but it's in a circular option. And first thing we do is we reduce our waste at every phase. And then what we can do is recycle. We take the products back from the waste phase and we try to recover it. We recycle it and or making it a source again. And then otherwise we actually recycle it back to the make phase and make it something useful or reuse it as it is. So this is at this moment considered the most operationalizing sustainability tool. There are several others different types of economic or tools like green economy, bioeconomy, but at this moment our governments and everyone are looking forward to circular economy. So again, why we are using circular economy is that in European Union we have in 2015 a directive of this circular economy to take it as a legislative proposal on how to go from waste to make it more useful. So there are mapped out a lot of actions, but again, this is non-legal abiding. So yeah, a lot of different countries are interpreting it in different way, but from the EU perspective, there is a directive and push towards it. So to understand circular economy a bit, if you want to use it in an operationalizing phase, it looks at resources, and it talks about resources in two ways. One is renewable and another one is finite materials. So their first aim is to preserve and enhance natural capital. And then what they do is in the operation phase, they have optimize the resource yields. And then, of course, their main target is to reduce as much as waste as possible, foster system effectiveness. And in this operation phase, they have two different cycles. One is biological cycle and another one is technical cycle. And this biological cycle is the core of bio-based circular economy. It's not, again, it's not something new, very new to us. The main output of a bio-based circular economy cycle is food. It's always going to be food. But there has been another output that that is in discussion since the fuel crisis in early 90s is the biofuel. But because of this current circular economy push, we are now looking forward to more and more products to go towards bio-based resources, because this is truly the only resource source that is renewable. So the second concept is land in bio-based circular economy. How does land fits in this circular economy proposal? First, soil itself can be considered as a finite resource. Soil can be grown, but again, it takes such a long time that it's just better we should consider it finite material. And again, this biological process that we are talking about, it needs soil to do its function. So it's essential in supporting the biowaste processes, and in itself, it is a finite resource. And why we need to talk about land? Because, of course, scarcity. Land is scarce, and of course, there is an impact of the population growth. And arability. Not only the land is scarce at this moment, we don't have as much as arable land. The land arability is decreasing by decade. And of course, this no net land take directive by European Union, it's again a non-legally binding document. You can check the progress of different countries on this one in European Union website. And all the nations, all the big European nations has failed to meet up their target of land take. So yeah, we do have a no-net land take by 2050, but so far, all the major European nations are failing to achieve their targets. So another issue with the land in bio-based circular economy is that the urban sprawl is that, of course, the urban population is growing, and we know people are getting more and more urban, but our cities are growing even more larger spatially than the population. The cities have grown 78%, while our urban population has increased only 33% in European Union. And when cities grow, they take up some lands. And as you know, cities are located in some very fertile land zones. And when they grow spatially, they take up the most arable land available. So they take up agricultural lands, they take up forest and semi-natural natural areas that are very essential for urban services. They take up those lands. So when we think about, okay, so we know how land fits in a bio-based circular economy, and we know that we need to do something about it. How do we fit it in? One of the opportunity we see from this research is that in cities, we can map out the underutilized, polluted, and degraded land that we have at our hand and kind of restore it and use it rather than taking up green lands. So these degraded lands that we're talking about can be considered brownfields. So this Cabernet definition of brownfields stands at sites that have been affected by former uses, are derelict and underused, are mainly or fully partly developed urban areas, and require intervention to bring them back to beneficial use, and may have real or perceived contamination problem. So this being the main risk of bringing them back, the contamination, real or perceived. So now the overlapping of these two concepts. We have bio-based circular economy in one hand and brownfields in another hand. So first we have old places of use. This is again one of the coal gas plant in Duisburg in Germany. And of course it became abundant in the 1980s. And this kind of land is what we call brownfields. And they are abundant in European Union. There's two terms that's been used, contaminated sites and potentially contaminated sites, as it's more than 2.5 million, and it's growing. And these lands can become potentially new places of use. Duisburg Park is an urban park at this moment. If you want to, you can look it up in Google Maps. Yes. So old places of use will become abundant, and they will in turn become new places of use. And again, you can look at it in a circular way. And this is what we are calling in our research group, circular urban land use. And these new spaces that brownfields can become, one of the options is to make them urban green spaces. And urban areas, when they were developed, they initially didn't have much green spaces that are necessary for the citizens of the area. And of course, urban areas are already high in demand and they are very stressed, so you cannot actually just develop green spaces in them. But these brownfields in urban areas, they provide an opportunity to include green spaces in urban landscape that has been previously missing. And these green spaces in urban circumstances provides a lot of ecosystem services, and which we think in urban circumstances should be considered as bio-based products in cities. And what type of different green spaces that can be introduced into cities? There are several types, but in our research group, we are looking at 15 different types of urban green spaces, building greens to urban park. There are different types. We are just working with 15 in this description. So when we go from brownfields to urban green space, there is a scope of integrating gentle remediation option. Gentle remediation options are using fungi or bacteria-based methods and plants with or without chemical additives and soil amendments to remediate the contamination. And the GRO in itself has the potential to improve the biological, chemical, and physical soil properties, enhance soil health, sustain plant productivity, and be used to transform browns to greens. So I will now talk about some of our research group outputs, and I will not go into details. We are just trying to develop some practical tools. It will take too much time to explain them in detail. I will just go through them. So first, what we produced is a bio-based land use framework, and we created 3 sets of tools. We have a paper on that if you want to look it into detail. So basically, one of the tool is this matrix. In one side, you have some site-specific basic conditions, and then, of course, the 14 different land uses that we're talking about. And here you have some basic conditions that are preferred by the urban green spaces. So if in a site, and then you can just mark them based on the conditions. So for a one-site application, it will look like we have a site close to our university, Phulsha. So in that brownfield, we checked that the site doesn't meet these 3 basic conditions for 3 green spaces, and for 5 other green spaces, it's difficult to meet them. So now you have at your hand 5 green spaces that can be realized in this site. And then another framework we have is to connecting gentle remediation option, a risk management framework. This is an early stage risk management framework and communication for site-specific identification of gentle remediation option and phytomanagement strategies. And again, we have a paper on this as well. It just came out last week. So this is again another risk management framework that we created. I won't go into detail, but we applied this in the same site in Phulsha, and we applied this for 2 green spaces, biofuel park and allotment garden. And these are the specific contamination risk of the site based on the land use. And you can see on the right-hand side the GRO strategies that are applicable in this site. So in summary, and the circular land use system, brownfields are not considered a waste, but they are a valuable resource in transition. And urban green spaces are fundamental for urban well-being by providing the citizen with numerous ecosystem services. Urban green spaces in combination with gentle remediation option can potentially be used to manage risk to human and ecosystem. And GRO can improve soil health and soil function, soil properties, enhance soil health and sustain plant productivity. And lastly, of course, circular economy is new, but SDG isn't. And if you want to working with soil and land, you want to include this in your agenda somehow, there are these specific goals and in sustainable the SDG that you can be that include soil and land in one way or another. Yeah, that can be included for contaminated land remediation. Yes, I will end with this. I don't know how to start.
No, you're fine. Thanks, Shaz. That's bang on time there. Very interesting. Appreciate that very much. Are you okay to hang about and we'll get some questions for you at the end of the session, if that's okay?
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Just quick update on the results of poll 2 that we did earlier. Those that are joining us today. We have a mix of 60% consultants, 5% contractors, 25% regulators, 5% landowners and developers, and 5% academic. I think probably now, while we switch over between speakers, might be a good time to run poll 3 that we've got for this session. So poll 3, the question that we're asking is, are you ready to meet up in person yet? Okay, so our final speaker for today is Jim Philp, OECD Paris. If we can get Jim up on screen, turn on.
I'm actually in now. It's I was kind of worried that I wasn't going to get in, but I managed to get in. I don't know what was going wrong. So, do you have my screen, or can I share it?
Yes, I think if you share your screen now.
Okay. Let me try this.
And then I'll give you a bit of an introduction.
Okay. Now I'm trying to share my screen. Go-tos. Go-to I'm not familiar with.
Okay, hang on. We will. Let me just see.
Share my webcam. Okay. Right. So that's okay. So if I go to my PowerPoint now, we'll.
Yes, Jim. If you go to your sorry, this is Alison here. If you just go to your PowerPoint, and then if you go to the sharing drop-down box,
Right.
You'll see like a play button, and if there's a drop down there where you should be able to share either your screen or the application.
Click to turn off your webcam. Click to
Keep
start screen sharing. Okay, click to start screen sharing.
Yeah, that's
Is
you.
that
You just
okay?
need to go. You just need to go into presenter
Got my
mode then
PowerPoint.
on your
Right.
PowerPoint. That's you.
Okay, let me find. And here we go. So is it coming up for you?
That's super. Yep, that's you.
Right. Okay. Oh,
Okay,
sorry
so-
for those.
Oh, no
Yeah.
worries. I'll just give you a bit of an introduction, Jim. We don't want to
Sure.
sell you short. Yeah, our next presenter is Jim Philp from the OECD Paris. So Jim is a microbiologist who's worked as a policy analyst at the OECD since 2011. He specialises in industrial biotechnology, synthetic biology and biomass sustainability. He was an academic for 16 years researching environmental and industrial biotechnology. He spent 8.5 years working in Saudi Arabia as an oil biotechnologist investigating field problems related to chemistry and microbiology and developing biotechnology solutions for improved oil recovery and exploitation, and has authorised over 300 articles. We're really happy to have you here with us today, Jim. So I will pass over to you for your presentation.
Right, so you can see my presentation right now. That's good. So thanks to the organisers for letting me in here. It's as you can tell from my accent, I'm a bit of a local, although I don't work in Scotland now. So yeah, I've been in France since 2011 with the OECD. So let me tell you who we are if you don't already know. We advise governments, there are 38 governments in the system just now, on all sorts of policy issues like taxation, corruption, corporate governance, and my little part of the world is a working party called Bio, Nano and Converging Technologies, BNCT. So we are tasked with advising these governments, and they tend to be the wealthy governments of the world, on policy strategies and various things. Now, I'll say right up front, we haven't done anything in contaminated land since 2011, mainly because it's, we work to what our governments ask us to do. But we're working on soil right now, and it's becoming, you'll all be aware that soil is now climbing up the political agenda. I suspect in my next 2-year period, we'll be much more involved with soil, not just contamination, but with other aspects like soil degradation. So let me get on then. I've pressed to advance, and I'm not advancing. So my screen is not advancing. Is it advancing for you? Oh, there, here we go. Sorry, it has gone. Can you see my second slide now?
Yes,
Yep,
Jim,
we're
we
all
can
good.
see that.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so part of our work in our last 2-year period was called Realising the Circular Bioeconomy, which we kind of scratched our heads a little bit about this because it's not immediately obvious. To me, the bioeconomy is already circular for academic reasons, but that wasn't obvious to governments. So here are 2 aspects of the work we were doing on that. We were asked by Thailand. Thailand isn't an OECD country, but they're aspiring, and we do a lot of work with Thailand anyway, to look at developing a roadmap for Thailand for biorefining. And there definitely is a connection to land use here, because one of the main reasons for this is Thailand is caught in what they call the middle income trap. They have done what Japan did and Taiwan and Korea, but they've got stuck in the middle income trap. And the next step up to the upper income system, they think, is to alleviate rural poverty. So this is a social sustainability issue here. There are vast numbers of farmers in Thailand, but an awful lot of them are subsistence and living in poverty. So we were asked to say, is there a value added that can be developed in Thailand by taking some of the crops and the waste materials or the residues from crops and converting them to bio-based products. And the bottom part here about sustainability, we've been at this since I joined, at least in 2011. because we have no real clear definition of what sustainability is, but everybody talks about it. And one of the functions always of the OECD is to try and make definitions and then to measure. And without a definition, it sounds boring, actually. And I've worked in a few definitions and they are boring and contentious. But without a definition, then it's impossible for a government to measure the effects on their economy in terms of GDP share. So that's part of the work we do, is always trying to measure. So we have to define sustainability and measure it. Right, okay, realizing the circular economy. This is a paper that came out of that a couple of years ago, 2018. So the whole thing was here is, can we marry the bioeconomy to the big changes happening in Europe around circular economy? And the answers at the time for me were self-evident, but they're not to the governments. Bio, I think, is circular anyway, but it's not necessarily more sustainable. Well, that's quite clear to us that you could make a bioeconomy that's unsustainable quite easily, and circular is not necessarily sustainable either. And right now, both are not really cost competitive, as the competition is fossil. So what we saw here were a lot of conflicts, but also a lot of synergies. And this is the classic policymakers' tightrope to walk here, to see if there are compromises and to make between real aspirations and what can actually be achieved. So waste materials, this is the first part of the work we're doing on realising the circular bioeconomy, is availability of waste materials for bio-based production. Now, we have a sister organisation, the International Energy Agency, and we as a result don't work on fuels, and I'm quite glad not to be working on fuels. We work on other bio-based products which have higher value added but lower production volumes than fuels. So this is a kind of classic that we see a lot, this type of diagram. But we know all this material here in huge quantities, 1 billion tons at least of and this is just things like a rice straw. These materials are available, but if you take them all off the land, then there's a problem, of course, because you need to leave some of that on the land for it to enrich the land and to fertilize the land. Now, there's also a big political or policy issue here, is that there is hardly any incentive for farmers to remove these materials. And as a result, for example, like rice straw, a great deal of the world's rice straw just gets burned in the fields because there's no financial incentive for farmers to harvest it. So another of these, the classics, is municipal waste. And what we find surprising to us is that the number of countries in the world where a lot of domestic, organic waste is simply still going to landfill, and that's one of the policy messages we have to put out, is that separation of these different waste streams, especially for us, the organic fraction, which can be used in biorefineries to make value added rather than simply wasting it. But there is a problem here of the word waste, especially in Europe, because by definition, I mentioned definitions earlier, by definition, a waste is a material that must be discarded. So we've been shocked to find that that some countries are unable to take materials to biorefineries simply because the definition says it's a waste and it has to be discarded, which sounds like a nonsense, but actually that's the reality on the ground that we face. Another aspect for this a circular bioeconomy is resource efficiency. Plenty of countries, plenty of sectors are looking at resource efficiency, and here is how the economists would define resource efficiency as the ratio between the intended effect, the benefit, and the environmental impact. So you can increase resource efficiency by a number of ways. First of all, reduce the amount of resources used, or reduce the environmental impact will increase resource efficiency. But again, we get to the problem of our definition. Now, in the bioeconomy, this is the classic for us of cascading use, which has been talked about a lot, about cascading use of biomass. And it's quite clear in a line diagram what this means is that you make one product, and then what's left, you make another product, etc., till all you've got left is a residue, which you can then use to make bioenergy. But the little bit in blue at the bottom, despite this cascading use concept being around for at least a decade, very, very little policy in any other countries that promote cascading use. So here again, I said that one of the things we do is measurement, and there are various ways that things that have to be done to measure overall resource efficiency from material input all the way through to, like for a bioplastic, the end of life for that bioplastic. So criteria to use for biomass sustainability, there are dozens and dozens that are possible, but we have to also think about the industrialists here. If you present an industry or a sector with dozens of biomass sustainability criteria to measure, then it won't get done because it's just simply far too expensive. And then it becomes a case of what are the actual criteria that you would apply. Right now, and this is something we presented a couple of years ago, but the situation hasn't changed. No international agreement on which criteria to use, no agreed measurement tools, life cycle analysis is far from optimal for this. And whereas the academic world thinks that the technical issues are the most challenging, the consensus, literally simply getting countries to agree, is a very, very large challenge, which isn't so easy to resolve. So the policy considerations on both of these, I mentioned the regulatory mismatch, this thing about can you use a waste in a biorefinery when you're supposed to discard it? And that's related to this second bullet here. Can we redefine the word waste as a secondary raw material? I won't read through all of these, but my slides are available to anybody when I'm done here. And I've just mentioned the things in resource efficiency about methodologies, hardly any supportive policy in there. And the bottom one is very important to us. The bioeconomy has only really been supported in policy in a lot of countries simply on energy. So bioethanol, biodiesel have had vast subsidy systems, but there's hardly anywhere you can find policy that supports bio-based products, which are higher value added and lower production volume and therefore less environmental impact. So this thing about biorefining in Thailand, let me just finish this for you here. One slide again. This is something which has been published just this year. The work was a little delayed during the pandemic. And let me tell you, the top bullet there is really at the heart of the issue here. The government we talked to, the people we talked to in government in Thailand didn't know about this. We only discovered this by going actually out to the farms and the countryside. And almost as an aside, one of the people on a biorefinery, a sugarcane biorefinery, told us that it's not possible in most instances to do production in a green zone. So production zones tend to be in urban areas. Green zones are agricultural areas. And one of our main recommendations is you have to resolve the zoning city planning, because what you're wanting to do is set up a network of biorefineries in the countryside. Right now, legally, it's just not possible. Now, the second bullet is something we see all the time, and we have to keep on saying it, although it sounds very obvious, that if you want to compete with fossil, and let's face it, there are so many articles in the news and in the media that say we have to eventually get rid of fossil, then what you have to make here is a framework of policy that is consistent and stable. So the idea of switching, of saying, we're going to have a bioethanol subsidy system and then trashing it 3 or 4 years later, starting again, that's not going to work, because this will need a lot of consistency over a long period and lots of inputs of government money to make this thing happen if we're serious about replacing fossil-based production in the longer term. And there are many things in here which are kind of common to a lot of the policy work we do. For example, the level playing field, it's just not there. The largest subsidy system in the world is still for fossil fuel consumption subsidies. It's enormous. And as you'll be aware, subsidies are usually used to get an industry started, and then when it stands on its own 2 feet, the subsidies disappear. But we have a fossil industry over 100 years old, and there are still a massive subsidy system, while there is hardly anything for bio-based products beyond fuels and energy. R&D subsidy is something important to the research community. It's not so important in the commercial side. Biorefinery financing needs different types of models. We've seen failures in Europe by not having, for example, loan guarantees. And this thing about flexible waste management, I'm back to that one, about this craziness of having a definition of waste which disallows you making useful products from it. So, get to this question here, and it's a little bit embarrassing perhaps. What have we done in contaminated land? Well, I've done plenty in past in my other lives, but we've hardly done any, and I said for the very reason that our countries haven't specifically asked us to do very much in this area. However, I produced something in 2013 as a result of a major workshop we held in Rimini in Italy, and we did look at this in bioremediation as part of the wider issue about biotechnologies for and in the environment. So there's a little bit here in bioremediation, and I've pointed out the thing about ecogenomics here and the policy issues surrounding ecogenomic policy with synthetic biology. So I can't really talk to you about work that's been done on the OECD very much in this, I'm afraid, but let me tell you a couple of issues that have come up. Now, I used to say with my colleague Ronald Atlas, I think in 2004, 2005, we said that bioaugmentation, i.e. adding microbes to a contaminated site, is something of snake oil. Most of the time it doesn't appear to work, and that's even using natural organisms. So this has come up for us a few times about genetic modification, and one of the things I pointed out with my colleague Ian Gillespie in 2013 is that if you look at this pathway here, there are plenty of places to make improvements to productivity of naphthalene degradation through synthetic biology, and nowadays it can be much more targeted and optimized. However, that part of it is only a single little part of the food chain. One of the problems with this is if you add these organisms to the soil, then does that just make all the Christmas dinners for the protozoa that sit directly above the bacteria? And that's something which hasn't really been resolved. If you were to ask me that if you wanted to do this, then it's only in the most extreme conditions, i.e. of pollutants which are extremely recalcitrant to biodegradation, that you'd be able to do this. And then you might say, well, if that's the case, if it's very extreme, why not take up the soil and use some other remedial treatment? So actually, in 2005, I was saying, I don't really see the place for this outside of the science and the understanding, but I can definitely see the place in universities, but it's very difficult to see this being applied a lot in the field. Now, so this is a very recent publication and about synthetic biology and bioremediation and what you might do, and it's great to be able to make a diagram, and you can see what they're doing here is using various ways and tools for synthetic biology to come up with microbes of the functional genes and then add them into conventional methods. That's the part I've been saying. Create this for in the academic world, so this might only be in research policy, which is therefore we say to governments, this is only right now useful in research policy, so therefore the budget should be limited. But you might be able to answer the question better than me. The question I'm going to ask is, how many regulators in what countries would allow this to happen in the environment anyway? Now, I have something here where there is a role for synthetic biology and artificial intelligence and machine learning, because this is from Graham Payton's lab in Aberdeen. I don't know, maybe is Graham in the audience today? If he is, I would ask the question later about the quotation from a paper. An urgent need to equip bioremediation practitioners with a suite of analytical devices to demonstrate the genuine scientific basis that underpins the process. Now, one of the problems that we have, of course, is in bioremediation compared to, say, incineration, is there's a great deal of unpredictability in the time required for the project and what are the endpoints. So if you're talking to a land developer these aren't the things that he wants to hear. If you say to if he says, how long is this project going to take so I can build my houses on this land? And if you say, not too sure, it's down to the bugs, and we don't know when the process is finished, we don't even know if we'll have reached the end points. So that's not what they want to hear. So we wonder if in this era of synthetic biology, we'll be able to come up with solutions to this by producing the predictive devices and software that give the industry more confidence that of when the process is going to be finished and what those endpoints will be. So my question to Graham, if he's actually in the audience, would be, since Elizabeth Diplock was the original author in this in 2009, has this actually happened? Because it's been there forever about the need to provide these tools for the industry. And I think that's me. Oh no, oh sorry, I couldn't have left without this. If I'm talking circular bioeconomy, is there any better example than this one? Caviro is a huge wine company in Italy. They have something like 10 or 11% of the domestic wine market. And what you see here is the old and the new. Right in the forefront here, you have the new, very modern stainless steel, up-to-date fermentation technology. But the part that might interest us a little bit more here, if you look to the back of this photograph, you'll see kind of orangey red bulldozers. What Caviro are doing is taking the wastes, like the seeds and the stalks from the wineries, and they're converting it back to something which can be applied back to the land through composting. And this is done on the scale of something like 80,000 tons per year. So this is actually a true example of circularity. You're making the value-added product in the wine, and you're taking residues and composting them back and putting them back to recondition the soil. So that's the one. I think that's where I finished today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Jim. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks for that.
Now, do I unshare this?
Yes, we will switch you back off. Hang on.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. So I've just got, before we move on to the Q&A session, I've just got the results of poll 3, which was, hang on, I'll just make myself visible again, which was in relation to when people would feel happy meeting up again. Obviously, SCLF is trying to organise what we do in the future. So 33% said that they were ready now, 5% went for the December meeting, 7% went for the March meeting, and interestingly 28% said that they don't normally attend, which suggests that those 28% hopefully just don't attend because they don't want to, but that maybe those are people who our normal meetings in Glasgow present a problem for them getting to. So I think just while we do the Q&A sessions, Tom, it'd be great if we could run poll 4 today, which asks the direct question: what type of meetings are you most likely to attend, either inline or on person? And we can get a view for what people are going for. So just now, I'd like it if I could invite all of our presenters from today to turn on their webcams, if that's possible, so that we can see everybody for the Q&A session. If everyone's okay to just pop their cameras back on again. Perfect. I think we've got everyone. So I will try and make the technology work and run through the questions that we received. So if anyone's got a question for one of our panelists today, feel free to pop it on and we'll try and field them to me. So one of the first questions that we've got is for yourself, Martin, and it's actually something that I'd written down myself during your presentation, which is, do you think COP26 will deliver what it needs to deliver? Do you think it's the right point in time, and do you think that COP26 will produce the next Paris Agreement, for want of a better way of putting it?
I think it has to. It's that simple. There's this the last chance saloon. That was John Kerry from the US said that. So, and what we've got now that we've never had before, or we've never fully had, is that this is COP26 to 25 before. One of them worked, 24 of them failed. This one has to come forward with it. It's that point I was speaking about, a playbook for innovation. Is that when you rock up at these meetings, it's about, well, what do we have to lose by not addressing climate change? We're very combative. Your economy needs to change, or your economy needs to... Paris changed that. Paris was, what do we have to gain globally by collecting and collaborating on climate change? And they got an agreement, but unfortunately immediately after Paris you got Donald Trump, so something didn't quite resonate. What didn't resonate was money. What didn't resonate was, it's all very well trying to save the planet, but at what cost? Can we afford to save the planet? Literally, that was the dialogue. And then came Joe Biden. I know I'm echoing, I don't know why that's happening, but so then Joe Biden came and rocked up. And so what Scotland needs to do, really importantly with the UK, obviously it's the UK COP, but what Scotland needs to do is showcase a net zero transition that's got an economic narrative driven through it. Otherwise Joe Biden will be gone in 4 years and Trump will be back, only worse. So it's not just, we absolutely have to deliver a Glasgow agreement. There you go, I've said it. A Glasgow agreement, 54 days, that shows that our economic adventure is steeped and aligned fully with nature, with our ecology, with our capabilities, and with these new values that we're all realised COVID taught us about, is the value of nature and the value of collaboration and the value of relying on each other, which is something humans haven't had to do for a while. You're taught to be quite independent from a child, but we saw during COVID what became important to us. Technology, you know, the ability to, we had to take one for the team. I had to stay at home so that other people, you know, could live safe lives. So for me, we have all of the technology. We also have, and this is the big announcement, is that the Glasgow Finance Alliance for Net Zero, somebody can Google it, GFANS, is Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England's coming with GFANS, which is like 49% of the world's investment bodies, BlackRock, Phoenix Group. And they're coming with, I think the last figure I saw was $30 trillion worth of investment. Now those world leaders and those investors are coming looking at Scotland going, what have you got for us? What have you got that we can get involved in? Where's these solutions? Where's these ideas? Are you the right kind of nation that thinks on its toes or falls on its knees, like Madrid, like Copenhagen? Like, I could list them all day long. So this is the opportunity of our lifetime, and it needs everybody to be on their toes. So on that point, answer your question in a shorter answer, yes, it will be successful, because the cost of it failing is incalculable, not just for us, but I'm looking at, you know, young people in your audience, their future and their kids' future. It's just not good unless we do this. So we have no choice. But let's do it through, you know, opportunity rather than being forced to do it. That's what we need to be doing. See, Jim's got his hand up there.
Yeah, Jim, have you got a point on that one? Oh, wait a minute. If you just unmute yourself, Jim.
Yeah, Martin, when you talk about of course, we're an economics organisation, and when I started in 2011, there was maybe an article about climate change once a fortnight, and at BBC website, The Guardian, etc., it's every single day now, and they must be realising if this year there were 400 wildfires in the United States and a lot in the West Coast, and people drowning in the East Coast. I mean, what is the economic cost of all that? You know, would you dare put a cost in a human life? But you're right, this is the last chance for them to say capitalism has to change. It really does have to, or the future is looking very, very poor indeed.
Here's a good note, Eve. Again, I should have shared all these things in advance. Google economic transformation. Kate Forbes set up a group, an economic transformation group, that's got some real rock star economists, Mariana Mazzucato, Sean Blythe, Sean McGrath, Mark Blythe, sorry. These people think in different, they're thinking about this new values, what Jim's talking about. Their GDP is driving us towards a very, very bad place. It always has done. So we need to shift those metrics that didn't work for poor people in developing countries, bin them, and start again with this new economic model. Scotland can do it. We can do it. We just need to get off our knees about this. Oh, it's really, really tough, and oh, somebody bigger than us needs to do this. This is on our watch. This is the no excuse era, and I can't wait to get started.
Brilliant.
I should drop a mic and walk out the room now, shouldn't I, Eve?
Yeah.
I haven't got one.
So a question for Shaz. Using brownfield land as an opportunity for urban green spaces, has there been much by way of real world examples of this, and have they been successful? Oh, so I think you just need to unmute. We can't quite hear you.
It's just short. But yeah, the image I started the presentation with, that is one of the examples. It's that said is Duisburg Nord. It's on the Rust Belt in Germany, so it's in the Ruhr region. So there, when the coal plant has all been shut down, that entire region kind of shut off, and the government suddenly had a lot of brownfields at their hands. And when they started developing, thinking about what to do with this, there's a landscape architect, Peter Latz, came in, and he kind of decided that we are going to keep most of the previous infrastructure, and started this industrial heritage movement. So a lot of these old coal plants are now developed as urban park. There are a few examples in US, and the one that I showed was Duisburg Nord in Duisburg, Germany. But a lot of urban green spaces, even in UK, I think 18% of brownfields that's been remediated in a year from 83 to 93 are urban green spaces. So yeah, there are studies that a lot of brownfields do get developed as a green space.
Thanks. We've got a sort of point of discussion here from Dave Cook, I think for yourself, Jim. He's saying, surely the regulatory system has to change at the same rate as other changes required to make real impacts. Biological production of fuels on the same scale as fossil fuels can never be sustainable.
Yeah, it's the work we're doing right now. We reached a conclusion at the end of the last 2-year period, so we're now we're now 9 months into a new 2-year period where we've switched our focus just from bioeconomy to renewable carbon more generally. For that very reason, it's quite clear that you cannot do that sustainably to replace all fuels by biofuels. It just, I think the figures we looked at was in Europe to replace all of the plastics, the fossil plastics, would require about 60% of arable land. So it's quite clear that this isn't going to work. It has to be married to recycling and other technologies. We work on nano, for example, and chemical technologies. So there's also in this a need for a change in outlook and a change in mindset in society about the way we do this. But that's the point I was making. We never have worked on fuels. We've worked on bio-based materials, and the more valuable that material is, you tend to find the lower the production volume. So if you look at bio-based materials, like for example, one we've had a look at is spider silk, which isn't ready for the market yet. But I mean, the volumes of biomass required for that are much, much lower than a bulk fuel. And that was a mistake of this century in the early years of putting so much a policy focus simply on fuels.
So we've got more of a comment here in relation to Shaz's presentation, but I think probably one that in this particular audience will be universally accepted, which is that prioritisation of brownfield regeneration is clearly essential. The continued use of greenfield sites for development is the worst kind of linear wastage. I think probably everyone in this group would get behind that as a comment. We've got something else from Martin here, which sort of been raised by a couple of individuals in relation to the changes that are required with respect to climate change and carbon emissions, whilst I think there's an appreciation that it has to happen everywhere from an individual level up, there's comments in relation to, like, clearly it also requires government action on a fairly large scale, and I think Dave has possibly summed it up quite well in his comment, which it requires government action on a scale similar to COVID response, but hopefully a lot better. So just your comments on that, Martin. Oh, sorry, I think if you could unmute yourself, I can't quite hear you. Can you hear Martin? Oh. Can we hear everyone else okay? Is it just Martin we've got a problem with?
It said I'm muted by the organiser.
Oh, there we go. You're back.
So somebody muted me, which is understandable. I would mute me too if I had the button. Absolutely agree. But if you think about the disruption the world's had from COVID, if you had to do that again because of climate change, I think we would just tip over the edge. Yes, but should it have happened earlier? It should have done. But tackling global climate change, it's just such a complex. I mean, it's such a volatile world out there. It's such a complex issue. And it's ambiguous, and there's no one size fits all. It is complete systems change, which is why I keep banging that drum about, instead of looking to see who to blame for doing more, do more yourself. Just take action. Every single one of us can do something. Government yesterday, Scottish Government put out their programme for government. Read it. Have a look at the headlines in it. The trajectory is crystal clear. It is a just transition to net zero. That's and Jim and I are of a certain age, I would say, Jim, in our 30s, and we remember this language that's been used now in programme for governments, for example, is unheard of. It's never been done before. It was always very much bland policy. At one point in the future, these things will happen. The trajectory is crystal clear. You have now 2 green MSPs and now ministers in the Scottish Parliament, which is interesting because that will actually help put the foot down a wee bit further on that journey. Not that we needed it, but it is always helpful to have more people who understand what the trajectory is. And actually, this point I keep making is about, there's been 25 COTs before, 24 failed. This isn't easy. Doing something like this isn't easy. Government just can't whack a button and suddenly things change, right? Mother Nature took over for COVID and said, I'm going to teach you all a lesson about interfering with nature and biodiversity. That sounds grim, but that's just a fact. We're doing things we probably shouldn't have been doing with food stocks and feedstocks and so on and so forth, but that's hard to breach into that cultural space. But the solutions for climate change are here. We have them. We have the money. We have the solutions. We have the ambition. Government set the trajectory, and COP is the place where it all needs to happen. So, I get the point is that governments need to do more. Of course they do. But I think we all can, be part of that solution focus rather than spend 1 minute looking at why things didn't work and just try and make things work better from our own perspective.
Right.
I think Jim's got his hand up again.
Jim's got a point if we can unmute Jim.
Yeah, I'm okay. Aye. And those things about government messages, Martin, like I say, I was new to this in 2011, and all the way through these years, it's been this competitive. When will this be price competitive with fossil? Now, I see that the private sector has to listen to that because they are out of business if they don't. But I'm saying to governments, we need radical thinking here. And governments have to stop asking when it will be competitive on price, because we know these are new technologies, and the more they use them, the cheaper they become. That's just simple in the world of innovation economics. So my message to governments has always been: stop thinking about being non-competitive with fossil, because if you actually add up the costs of fossil, then it's far, far more than what we're trying to do here. So that is a message. Governments will say to me then, that's been unrealistic. But this is the thing you're saying, Martin, it's that it isn't a button to press. It's really, really complicated, far more complicated, in fact, than solving the science issues.
Can I jump back in just as a quick supplementary to Jim? what Jim and I are describing here, and hope people hear it, is that what is the point in incrementally trying to improve a system that hasn't worked for everyone? Why would we think like Blockbuster Video when Spotify's already changed the way we watch movies? So there's something about governments taking cognizance of the fact that things have changed and they're never going to go back to the way they were, right? We know that it's cheaper. There's far cheaper ways with fossil fuels now, but there just needs to be this collective understanding of, I'm not going to waste any more time, you know, incrementally trying to improve that system. I'm going to look at the new one. I'm going to be disruptive. I'm going to create a new wealth economy that's based on nature, that's ecologically balanced, that's exciting, and it's all the stuff that Shaz and Jim speak about. This is the brave new world for us, and this is where we need to be at our absolutely very best. If we finish this call and go back to emails, oh, it's tough, it's challenging, we're finished. I can't stress that point enough. This is the time, to use a football metaphor, and I promise it's my only one. We're 1-0 down against Mother Nature at half time, but we're 2 goals from victory. And I don't want MD to waste their time analysing why we lost a goal. Focus on scoring more. That's all we have to do now. So again, it's in our hands, so let's just get on with it.
I think that's actually a really good comment to end that session on. Just the last thing to bring you is the results of that final poll, where we were asking everyone on here whether you'd prefer to meet up in person or online, and obviously we're trying to balance making things accessible to everybody whilst still maintaining like some social perspective and not just seeing each other online. Hopefully we will be able to see each other in person. But the results of that were that 19% went for in person and 81% went for online. So I think that is fairly conclusive, and maybe this pandemic will change how we meet in some ways going forward. But I think that's been a really brilliant discussion today, to be honest. So really all that it remains for me to say is to say a massive thank you to Martin, to Shaz and to Jim for their time today. It's been a great session, and I think I've covered everyone's questions. Hopefully I have, and hopefully everyone has enjoyed that. We're going to, Tom will run now the video presentations from our sponsors, and hopefully we'll see everyone back here again later on this afternoon at 3:30 for our second session. So yeah, thanks very much once again to our presenters. That was brilliant, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye now.
Bye.
Developing on brownfield land. The demand for development opportunities has led to more competition for brownfield plots. However, these plots can present challenges, particularly in densely populated post-industrial land in the UK. Ground contamination on these sites puts standard construction materials at risk, as their durability tends to be tested in favourable ground conditions. As our understanding of material science increases, so does our understanding of the long-term effects on human health when exposed to carcinogenic contaminants, increasing the importance to future-proof developments to protect workers and residents. Unlock your brownfield potential with Juta UK's GP Titan Tech membranes. These multi-layer thermoplastic membranes prevent the migration of harmful substances and gases into habitable areas, creating a safe environment. For more information, contact Juta UK at www.juta.co.uk.
ERS is a specialist contaminated land contractor with over 25 years' experience of remediation, site investigation and many other brownfield services. We are an independent, fully employee-owned company. Our multidisciplinary staff members are all committed to ensuring client satisfaction. We offer a wide range of investigation and remediation services under one roof, including soil and groundwater remediation, materials and waste management, site investigation, invasive weeds treatment, and laboratory treatability testing. We provide a range of remediation services including chemical remediation, bioremediation, stabilisation and solidification, and process-based remediation. We can prepare comprehensive materials management plans in accordance with clear code of practice, including cost-effective solutions for the disposal or reuse of soils. We offer a full range of site investigation services including high-resolution site characterisation, detailed hydrogeological characterisation, and groundwater and ground gas monitoring and sampling. We can treat a wide range of invasive weeds including Japanese knotweed, giant hogweed, Himalayan balsam, buddleia, rhododendron and many more. Our services are supported by an in-house treatability laboratory. We can assess soil and water and optimise remediation using respirometry and qPCR. Give us a call or visit our website to learn more about our services.